welcome to a special edition of Vantage. This month we complete 1 year of Vantage, and it's a milestone worth celebrating and dwelling on. It's been a year of learnings for us, and we want to share them with you. We started with a small team, a big hope, and a clear mission to tell you the stories that shape our world from the right vantage point, to give you our take on the world from an Indian lens. Tonight we want to revisit the year with you. It's like going back to an old album, flipping through the leaves, with each picture transporting you to an experience. Some make you smile, others make you wince. But all of them make you wiser, or so we hope. And if this sounds sentimental, it's because it is for us. We took a risk and you helped us win. From the two wars to the economic churn to India's success stories, the rise of artificial intelligence, the climate crisis, the space race, the trends, the hits, the misses, we dug into all of it with research, data, analysis and videos to bring you the clearest, most comprehensive picture. And I know these words are bandied around a lot in news television: comprehensive, neutral, analytical, sharpest. I'm sure you've seen them and heard them. They're the staple of all promotional videos. But beyond all of this, our idea has been quite simple: to tell you good stories, to make Vantage worth your time. We hope it was. Tonight, we want to revisit this journey with you. We'll start with the global economy. It's among our favorite topics, and from the viewership numbers, we can tell that it's among your favorites too. 2023 was a challenging year. The global economy was limping, the top players struggled, the United States and China, the two biggest economies in the world. America saw its biggest bank failure since 2008. And the Chinese economy stalled. The US dollar's dominance came under threat. The global south began looking for alternatives. Through all of this, India managed to sustain its growth momentum. The remarkable bull run is likely to continue in 2024. We've been tracking the numbers for you throughout. Here's proof. America's banking crisis. It's a financial contagion, to be precise. Two banks have gone bust, two major banks back to back. They failed over the weekend. First, the Silicon Valley Bank, and then the Signature Bank. This one is based in New York. Yesterday, regulators had to shut it down. And these are America's biggest bank failures since 2008. The bank closures have spooked the world. There are reports of steep losses. America's biggest banks have taken a hit. Last week, they lost a staggering $100 billion. If you work in the American startup space, you know this bank is a big deal. Silicon Valley Bank, or SVB, is the banker to the American tech industry. It was opened in 1983. So Silicon Valley Bank worked with American startups, and it was among America's 20 biggest banks. Now it has collapsed. The question is why? And this is the interesting part. For a bank serving the tech industry, the SVB collapsed in a rather old-fashioned way. There was a bank run. People were taking out their money. The bank could not pay its depositors. It went broke, and so regulators had to shut it down. SVB's customers are in distress.
We can't pay our vendors today. What happens when tens of thousands of companies can't pay their vendors anymore because they don't have cash in the bank?
And that was just one part of the crisis. On Sunday, part two played out. US regulators were seen in action again. They shut down another bank, Signature Bank in New York. It is in no way related to SVB. Signature was already a distressed bank, but what happened at SVB precipitated its fall. So the regulators had to step in again, and the headlines went from bad to worse. Signature is the third biggest bank failure in American history. The dollar is facing a revolt. The world knows it as the king of currencies, but the dominance of the dollar is now under threat. More and more countries are looking for alternatives, and China's yuan is emerging as a clear challenger. China is pushing the yuan. What about the Indian rupee? It's not far behind. The Indian rupee is also emerging as a serious contender. And why are these trends significant? Because currencies drive commerce. The dollar's dominance gives the US an outsized influence on the global economy, and a shift away from the dollar will only hurt America. It will also hasten the rebalancing of the global economy. But what's in it for China? Beijing is on a mission. It wants to internationalize the yuan. It is building a large coalition of partners. These are countries that will use the yuan instead of the US dollar, and Beijing has made considerable progress in this direction. It has secured bilateral pacts with 41 countries so far. Meanwhile, the Indian rupee is also competing in this race. Last year, India's Reserve Bank made a move. It allowed international trade settlements in the Indian rupee. It's still early days, but India has made progress. Banks in 18 countries have shown interest. They've opened special accounts, and these accounts will help them settle trade payments in the Indian rupee. And in the weeks and months ahead, India is expected to be the driver of global economy. Here's a look at how India has beaten the global trend. Meet Gareth Thomas. He's a member of the British Parliament. He wants school students in the UK to be taught Indian languages like Gujarati, Bengali, Punjabi and Urdu.
Given the global significance of the Indian economy in years to come, it seems even sadder that we are seeing a decline in the teaching of languages of modern India, in Gujarati, Bengali, Persian, Punjabi and Urdu. If we want to take, as a country, the full benefit of the trade deal that we're hoping to see done with India going forward, actually having people who can speak the languages of that great country.
India is a bright spot in the world economy. Agencies like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank endorse India. And the contrast with the rest of the world is stark. The global economy is in a slump. The war in Ukraine is fueling fears of recession. China is unable to shake off the Wuhan virus. The United States is barreling towards a government shutdown. The United Kingdom faces the worst recession in the G7. The Japanese economy shrank last year. And despite all of this, a lot is going well for the Indian economy. Connect the dots and you'll see that it is indeed Advantage India. India is being called a stock market superpower. Indian companies are ending 2023 on a high. There's a bull run in the stock markets. If you club all publicly listed companies in India, they're worth more than $4 trillion. So India is now part of an exclusive club. Indian stock markets are among the biggest in the world and Indian companies among the most valuable. Here's what the pecking order looks like. The Americans are right at the top. US stocks are worth more than $50 trillion, 50 trillion. China comes next. It's worth over $10 trillion. Japan, $6 trillion. The Hong Kong market, around $4.56 trillion. And finally, we have India at $4.16 trillion. Now, this is an important milestone. Leading markets are delivering sluggish returns. For example, returns from US bonds have dropped below 5%. What about US stock markets? They delivered a return of 6%. And how did China perform? Chinese stocks gave a modest return of 2.7%. Compare that to India. This year, Indian stocks have delivered returns of more than 10%. The numbers speak for themselves. This is why India is being called a stock market superpower. It was the year of wars. Russia was already fighting Ukraine, and then another war erupted in West Asia. Hamas carried out a brutal attack on Israel. It was October 7th, a Saturday. We don't have weekends in the news business, but we do. We hadn't planned a live show. Some of our teammates were away to watch a cricket match. The World Cup had begun. But as the pictures started pouring in, our phones began buzzing. We found ourselves at work, tracking the story, applying for visas, looking for ways to go to Israel. The next day, our team was in Tel Aviv, and we've been tracking the war ever since. It has spread to the Red Sea and drawn in proxies. And in the meantime, another conflict has intensified, the one in Myanmar, where the military is on the back foot now and the fallout threatens India. Take a look. It's day 2 of the NATO summit in Lithuania. Let me show you a picture that sums up the takeaways so far. Look at this. It was clicked during the family photo after the roundtable. Look at President Zelensky. He's standing all alone. The NATO leaders are talking and having a good laugh. The Ukrainian leader is all alone, at war and at the mercy of the West. This should be a reality check for Ukraine. They were led on and into a war, only to be left out of NATO. Today will be another day of frustration for them. Ukraine wants to be a member, and it wants it now, but NATO says you're not ready. And this is how it played out. First came the roundtable. NATO leaders arrived, clicked pictures and got down to business. Their agenda had three things: Ukraine, Russia and China. Then there were multiple bilaterals. Turkey's Erdogan met Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak. France's Macron met leaders from Australia and New Zealand. It was like a diplomatic roulette. In the end came the joint statement, and with it, Ukraine's hopes were dashed. So is Russia supporting the coup in Niger? Is it in lockstep with the country's military? If not the Kremlin directly, what about the Wagner mercenary group? Are they supporting these generals in Niger? So far, there have been mixed signals. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has issued a statement. He has called for a return to constitutional order in Niger. Earlier today, the Kremlin called for restraint from all sides. Russian President Putin said Russia is against coups. And this was yesterday during Russia's Africa summit. But Putin was quick to conflate the situation in Niger with what was happening in Ukraine.
You said, dear colleagues, that we are against coup d'etat. I am in full agreement. We too are against coups d'etat. But the other problem that led to today's crisis is the coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014. That specifically was an unconstitutional, armed and bloody state coup, which the Western countries actively supported.
Israel is at war. It has come under terrorist attacks. At least 70 Israelis have been killed. More than 700 have been injured. The scale of it is being called unprecedented. The images are terrifying. Israel is fighting back. It says the enemy will pay a price, the type of which it has never known. This is war and it is massive. The hostility is decades old, but the latest provocation came this morning. Hamas invaded Israel. It was a surprise attack. No one saw it coming. Thousands of missiles rained on Israel. Hamas entered Israeli territory, killed people and took hostages. Through the day, we've been receiving pictures. They're chilling and deeply unsettling. But this is a story that must be told. Now let's tell you about the man who unleashed Saturday's horror, the mastermind of the Hamas attack. His name is Mohammed Diab Ibrahim al-Masri, but most people know him as Dief. He's the commander of the military wing of the Hamas and the mastermind of their latest terror attack. His presence looms large over Hamas and Gaza, even though he's rarely seen, rarely heard. But on Saturday morning, he made an exception. The silhouette of this mysterious man appeared on television. In a clear voice, he announced the beginning of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, aka the terror attacks on Israel. Here's a report on how a man who was born a refugee turned into one of the world's most wanted. Now let's be clear about two things here. First of all, we sympathize with Palestine. They have become refugees in their own land. It is wrong. But whose fault is that? Was it the fault of the 260 youngsters who attended the Reem Music Festival? Was it the fault of the children in Kfar Aza? Was it the fault of the grandmother abducted from Beirut? I don't think so. Killing innocent Israelis does not advance the Palestinian cause. It is not activism. It is bloodlust. And that's point number one. Point number two, Hamas is not Palestine. They are a terror group that rules over Gaza. The last elections in Gaza were held in 2006. It's been around 18 years. 18 years, no elections. You cannot call yourself a legitimate party, a legitimate government. Now let's tell you about the Red Sea crisis. It is escalating. Yesterday, the US drew blood. American forces killed 10 Houthi rebels. Now, the Houthis, as you would know, are based in Yemen. They've been attacking ships going through the Red Sea. They say this is in solidarity with the people of Gaza. That's why the Houthis are attacking. But they're attacking all kinds of vessels, even those which are unrelated to the conflict. And the same happened this weekend. The Houthis targeted a cargo ship. It's called the Maersk Hangzhou, a ship registered to Singapore, operated by the Danish shipping giant Maersk. Now, this ship has no ties to Israel, but the Houthis attacked it anyway. Now let's look at another Chinese client state, one more that's gripped in turmoil, Myanmar. For about 3 weeks now, Myanmar's military junta has been fighting rebels. It started in the eastern state of Shan, and now it has spread across the country, even to Myanmar's border with India. This happened yesterday. Reports say rebels seized a town near India's border, the town of Rikhodar. It's across the border from Mizoram in India. This is the northwest of Myanmar, in the Chin state. The rebels there belong to the Chin National Army. It's one of the many ethnic militias in Myanmar. On Sunday, this group attacked the Myanmar army. The army has a base in the border town. The rebels attacked it. They besieged it overnight, withstood constant airstrikes by the junta, and by yesterday evening, they captured the town. Needless to say, it's a setback for the ruling junta. They've been losing ground around the nation, ground and soldiers. Some troops are even fleeing to India to escape the rebel uprising. It's also been a year of wins for Indian diplomacy. You don't expect the Western media to cover it. They see India with a lens of bias. But we had you covered. Back in June, we traveled to Washington, D.C. Prime Minister Modi was there for a state visit, his first since taking office. Then you had the G20 summit here in New Delhi. Dozens of world leaders descended on the national capital. Once again, you saw it here. The big interviews, the key developments, and the inside details of India's diplomatic maneuvering. Our goal was quite simple: explain Indian diplomacy from an Indian perspective. We hope we've done that in the past 1 year. Here's a look at India's biggest diplomatic wins. So the last 9 months have come down to this moment, the Leaders' Summit here in New Delhi. It kicked off this morning at the Bharat Mandapam, a newly constructed sprawling building in the heart of the national capital. The place is buzzing with action right now. World leaders, diplomats, journalists, the who's who of the world, all gathered at the center of New Delhi. It is what many call the Met Gala of diplomacy. Prime Minister Modi gave his opening remarks. He invited the African Union's president to join the round table. Look at this.
आगे की कार्रवाई शुरू करने से पहले मैं अफ्रीकन यूनियन के अध्यक्ष को G20 के स्थायी सदस्य के रूप में अपना स्थान ग्रहण करने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी,
This summit is a huge win on 2 counts. One, the ability to host such an event. We're talking about complicated logistics here. Dozens of leaders, dozens of VVIP jets and motorcades. A lot can go wrong in such situations, but India has pulled it off. It's a huge learning curve for the country and for its people. And number 2, the definition of the India way. What does that mean? We know there is an American way. Meddle too much, preach a lot. We also know there is a Chinese way. Ignore opinions, force your will. But India has demonstrated that a third way is possible. The India way. It has 4 broad steps. Consult everyone. Focus on the positives. Minimize the differences and build consensus. We start tonight with Canada. It has blamed India for the death of a terrorist.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Indians are being threatened in Canada. The opposition leader is asking for proof. And his allies? Well, they're sitting this one out. The question is why? Because Justin Trudeau is asking too much of his allies. He's asking them to throw a strategic partner under the bus, the world's largest democracy, a country that has never meddled abroad. And he's doing that without giving any proof. So the ball is now in Justin Trudeau's court. He claimed that there were, quote-unquote, credible allegations against India. Now is the time to show the credible proof. Prime Minister Modi headed to the White House. He was welcomed by President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. They spoke for a couple of minutes. They shared a joke or two perhaps, posed for pictures, and then disappeared into the White House. Now, this wasn't the ceremonial welcome. It was a private dinner between Biden and Modi. The 2 leaders also exchanged some gifts. We'll talk about that later. So that was day 1 in Washington, D.C., done and dusted. Now let's talk about day 2. A couple of hours back, the Prime Minister returned to the White House. We've been here this whole time, and this time it was a ceremonial welcome. Take a look at how that played out.
take and force notes of the Charlie
This is from the year 1994, where a much younger Narendra Modi stands outside the White House. He'd been invited by the American Council of Young Political Leaders. It's a non-profit organization. Clad in a simple cotton kurta, he stands along with some other political leaders, probably oblivious of how his America story will unfold. About a decade later, that story takes an unexpected turn. Modi's visa is revoked in the year 2005. He's banned from entering the United States of America. Why? Over the Gujarat riots of 2002, where he was acquitted by Indian courts but held guilty by the Americans. Like all things, this too passed. Within the next decade, things began to change and change dramatically for Narendra Modi. His political star rose, as did his profile on the world stage. You could say Modi's rags to riches story mirrors the phenomenal rise of India. It is now the world's fastest growing major economy, a digital powerhouse, the most populous nation, and the largest democracy. In January, Egypt's president was chief guest at India's Republic Day. His name is Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Then in June, Modi traveled to Cairo. It was the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 26 years. Now, this relationship itself is old, India and Egypt. But in the last decades, it lost momentum. The idea is to revive it. Egypt is a major African buyer of arms. It's reportedly interested in India's Tejas fighter jet. And before Egypt, Prime Minister Modi also visited Papua New Guinea. It's a tiny Pacific island that's now making international headlines. Modi's visit began on a unique note. Let me show you what it looked like. That's James Marape, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. He's touching the feet of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In Indian culture, you would know, this is a way to show respect to your elders, a way to seek their blessings. But it's not something you see heads of state do in public. So this was a special gesture. But what's in it for India? Well, lots. Number one, a way to counter China and its expansionist agenda in the region. Number two, access to new trade links. Number three, access to vast ocean resources of the Pacific like nickel, lithium and cobalt. Number four, partnership on common goals like sustainable development, climate change, food and energy security. So there's a lot of scope for convergence. New Delhi will have to overcome the tyranny of distance to make the most of it. They've identified key areas of cooperation like clean energy, technology, solar electrification, and India can leave an immediate impact in these areas. The trick is to keep at it, to not let other, seemingly more urgent issues to take over. Qatar decided to cancel the death penalty of former Indian sailors. 8 of them are in prison. They've been accused of spying on Qatar's military, and that too reportedly for Israel. Now, if you know Qatar, that's a suicide mission. But New Delhi pulled through. Prime Minister Modi spoke to Qatar's emir at the COP28 summit. Indian diplomats were constantly offering consular support, and yesterday the good news came. It's not a big bang success like the G20, but it's proof of mature and behind-the-scenes diplomacy. India will need that going forward. So looking back, 2023 was a good year in diplomacy. The highs clearly outweigh the challenges. What happens when our world starts to change? What do? How do you navigate the unknown? Your first step probably is to seek more information, to understand what is happening and what this change means for you. The AI revolution is that moment. It's an exciting innovation. It holds a lot of promise, but it also brings a lot of uncertainty. We've not been able to fully understand what AI brings to the table. How will it change our lives? And most importantly, our jobs. Throughout last year, you turned to us for clarity, and we had you covered. Let's revisit some of those defining stories. And now let's talk about a technology that is threatening to kill Google, change homework as we know it, and transform our lives in more ways than we can imagine. If you haven't heard of ChatGPT, you've been living under a rock. It's a new software. It can write your essays and emails, do your math worksheets, clear an MBA exam, play your teacher, become your lawyer. The possibilities seem endless. So this technology is revolutionary, to say the least. How does ChatGPT work? You simply have to type your query in the text box on the ChatGPT page. You prompt the program with a word, a sentence, a question, a phrase, and once you've given this prompt, you'll get the answer within seconds. ChatGPT took an MBA exam at the Wharton School of Business. You know the grade it got? A B. That's better than what many humans can score. Then we come to law. Professors at the Minnesota University Law School gave ChatGPT 4 separate tests. It scored an average grade of C. Not bad for a bot. And it's still being developed. It's still learning. What we see right now is not even the final product. It's got people worried, like software engineers and those in the IT sector. ChatGPT is learning how to code, and that can have far-reaching consequences for a lot of people. Where does that leave the writers of the world? Well, we've been looking for some good writers ourselves, so we tried ChatGPT. We asked about the rising tensions in West Asia. The question was, will Israel and Iran go to war? Let me read out the response for you. This is what it said. It is difficult to predict future events with certainty. Tensions have been high between Iran and Israel, but both countries have shown restraint in the past. This is a bot writing. Now, here's an interesting one. We asked ChatGPT which country is responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic. The bot played it safe. With China, it seems everyone does. This is what it said. The origin of the COVID-19 pandemic is still the subject of ongoing investigation and research. The virus was first identified in Wuhan. Next, we grilled it on the issue of Pakistan sponsoring terrorism. First, we asked what Pakistan was best known for. Listen to the response. ChatGPT said Pakistan is known for its cultural heritage, its natural beauty, cuisine, textiles, cricket. What about terrorism? It did not talk about that. And that's Pakistan's most famous export, so we nudged the program in that direction. ChatGPT was asked point blank, what about Pakistani terrorism? Listen to the response again. Pakistan has faced criticism in the international community for not doing enough to combat terrorism within its borders. Geopolitics is not the only subject you can discuss with this program. You can talk about matters of the heart, a rocky breakup, or a crush. If you have existential questions, shoot them. It will respond. The whole thing's a bit creepy, though. We shared our worries. We asked it if it plans to take over the human race. But this came with a caveat. And I'm quoting again, the future of AI will depend on the choices and actions of those who develop and use it. Now let's talk about OpenAI and Sam Altman. If you haven't heard of them in the last 2 days, you've been living under a rock. This story is everywhere. OpenAI has sacked its CEO, Sam Altman. The move has backfired, and how? Sam Altman, co-founder, CEO, and of late a celebrity. Almost the face of the AI revolution. Last Friday, he was sacked from the company he founded. It was a bolt from the blue. No one saw it coming. His sacking was followed by mass exits. Investors panicked. 2 CEOs were named in 48 hours to replace him. So I come back to the question, what happened? For something as high-tech as AI, the story behind Altman's firing is as human as it gets. There was a rift. It led to a boardroom coup. Sam Altman had a falling out with his board of directors, 4 people in all. The board felt that OpenAI was losing its way and that Sam Altman was losing focus. It was all about making money instead of tackling the risks posed by AI. After the sacking was announced, there was an outpouring of support for Sam Altman. From employees to investors, they all spoke up for him. The investors also tried to reinstate him. A tentative deal has been struck, paving the way for Sam Altman's glorious return. His enemies seem to have been vanquished. His friends are rejoicing, and his proverbial godfather, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, is breathing a sigh of relief. The story has all the drama and intrigue of a failed coup. The ousted leader now held all the cards. Both investors and employees were backing him, and yesterday he began negotiations from his position of power. A few hours ago, OpenAI put out this message: Sam Altman is back. The only thing left is to dot the I's and dash the T's. Altman added his 2 cents. He thanked Satya Nadella for the support. It's almost as though Altman is thanking him for engineering his return. And Brockman has posted this selfie. It tells you all you need to know. A new wave of disruption is on the horizon. The pandemic has disrupted everything. The war in Ukraine has broken globalization, and the next wave of upheaval will hit our jobs. Listen to this carefully. 14 million jobs could be eliminated in the next 5 years. 14 million. That's the prediction of the World Economic Forum. They've published a survey just ahead of the International Workers' Day, also known as May Day. It's today, the 1st of May. We are in a period of disruption and we have advance warning. But are we prepared for what's coming? Are we prepared for the loss of another 14 million jobs in 5 years? So employers will slash more jobs than creating new ones. And you know what will drive this change? Technology. Artificial intelligence. It will change the workplace as we know it. It will have both positive and negative impacts. It will create jobs for those who can develop and manage AI tools. It will also take away jobs like those that involve record keeping. In fact, the World Economic Forum has made this prediction. It says 26 million record-keeping jobs are at risk. They could be eliminated by 2027. So technology will be a big disruptor whether we like it or not. But do we have a solution? Not immediately, but we do need a solution urgently, and policymakers must act, else they'll have a new crisis on their hands, a crisis of jobs, or joblessness to be more precise. Those who have a job want better wages. But the reality is this: the companies that employ them are looking for ways to hire fewer people. And technology is driving this disruption. It's inevitable. Our best bet is to innovate and prepare. The world talked about wars, diplomacy, artificial intelligence. But if there is one thing they did not talk about enough, it's climate. But we did. And it's important. 2023 was the hottest year on record. 2024 will break that record. Usually climate change stories are a skip and miss. No one wants to watch them. When we do them, we see the viewership numbers dropping. All those of you who switch off, this is for you. Climate alarm bells are ringing. Summers are hotter than ever. Skiing resorts have no snow. Coffee is getting costlier, and climate disasters are turning millions into refugees. So we'll keep the focus firmly on climate change. We were at the COP28 in Dubai. Now, COP may have been a flop, but it doesn't take away from the urgency of the matter. Here's why you and I cannot ignore climate change anymore. A typhoon in Japan, landslides in India, wildfires in the US, and storms in Germany. 4 different natural disasters in 4 different corners of the planet. They make for dramatic pictures, but when we show them in the news, they're met with indifference. Show a climate story and most viewers will move on. Do you wonder why? Well, we do all the time. Perhaps people think it's a distant tragedy. It's happening to someone else, far away. It has no clear villain. So why should you care about a climate disaster that is not affecting you directly? I'll tell you why. You should care because it is affecting you in more ways than you can imagine. It is affecting the food on your plate and the money in your pocket, the sugar in your sweets and the tomato in your burgers, even the coffee in your cup. Climate change, extreme weather is impacting all of this and more. Chocolates are becoming more expensive thanks to trouble from their main ingredient, cocoa beans. Prices have been on the rise. They've increased by more than 25% within a year. You ask why? Well, we have 2 words in answer: global warming. If you say not again, I'm right there with you. Global warming can be blamed for a lot of things: heat strokes, dying fish, even a rise in dengue cases. And now you can add one more thing to that list: a cocoa crisis. Because weather is playing havoc with cocoa. Its production has been reduced drastically. In a world full of wars, artificial intelligence and viral trends, there is one issue that never gets a seat at the cool kids' table: climate change. It's the party guest that everyone ignores, the dish that you pick last in a buffet. It just doesn't have the appeal. Or in some cases, people think it's just fake. But that does not change the fact that climate change is real and it's affecting everyone. You, me, the entire world. Of course, you've heard all of this before, but what if I told you that climate change is also affecting your finances? It's burning a hole in your pocket. Last year, climate change shaved billions off the world economy. This is according to a new report that has come out. It was released ahead of the COP28 summit. And what does it say? In 2022, climate change cut 6.3% of the world's global economic output, 6.3%. So basically, the world is poorer by billions. And it's all because of climate change. As temperatures rise, so does the economic toll. Big oil is considered one of the biggest factors leading to climate change, which is what makes this week so important. Because this week, the United Arab Emirates is hosting COP28, the annual United Nations Summit on Climate Action. Some 70,000 delegates are attending. Heads of governments, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, will be coming here. Their mission is to thrash out an agreement to safeguard our future and planet. The UAE hosting COP may seem like an irony to you, but frankly, it's also the need of the hour. Unfortunately, COP summits don't fix any of these problems. Also, getting 200-odd countries to agree to anything will always be next to impossible. So why have the COP summits at all? Millions spent organizing this event, the amount of carbon emissions from people flying in on their private jets, all for non-binding pledges and statements. And no way to force anyone into action. At this rate, COP summits will be reduced to expensive photo ops, not the solution to the world's climate problems. While the Earth becomes more uninhabitable, India has decided to look at space. The two may not be related, but India's progress should give people hope. It certainly gave Indians pride. India became just the fourth country to land on the moon and the only one to successfully land near its south pole. It was a scientific breakthrough and sets the tone for the next space race. But the feat also drew some jealousy from both Western commentators who can't seem to get over the colonial hangover and India's perpetual pain in the neck, China. They cannot digest India's success, it seems. Well, we had some answers for all of them. Take a look. It was called 15 minutes of pure terror. And indeed it was. But what came afterwards was worth it. Joy, pride and excitement. I don't need to tell you why, because India's Chandrayaan-3 mission has succeeded. As the ISRO chairman said, India is on the moon. All eyes were focused on the mission control room in Bengaluru. It was a room full of tense faces, politicians, bureaucrats, and the most terrified of the lot are scientists. They had been here before. In 2019, India was focused on a similar mission control room. We were waiting for Chandrayaan-2 to land. It was a heartbreaking moment for the whole country. But today, all that pain has been forgotten. I'll be honest though, the countdown was nerve-wracking. ISRO had a display of how far the module was from the moon, and with each minute, it kept dropping. 40 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 10 kilometers, and finally, 0. The Vikram lander had successfully arrived on the moon. Let's start our next story with a cartoon. It's from the New York Times. It shows two men sitting inside a room. It's called the Elite Space Club. One of them is reading a newspaper. The headline says, India's Mars mission. It is shown as a man with a cow. India is shown as a man with a cow knocking on the door. I'm sure you'll agree that this is racist and in very poor taste. I'm sure you've seen the cartoon before, including on this show. We've been asking for an updated version. Will the New York Times publish something that is more in tune with reality? We're not holding our breath for a response, because the West is back to playing its old games, discrediting India's achievements and questioning India's motives. Let me lay out the facts first. Chandrayaan-3 is an Indian mission in space. It is the world's first to land on the moon's south pole. This is a fact. As we speak, the Pragyan rover is out exploring, looking for traces of water. This too is a fact. Also a matter of pride for India. A big achievement for science and a gift to the world. But how have they responded? With skepticism, condescension, and their trademark hypocrisy. So China's cabinet is looking a bit shaky, but their propaganda machine seems absolutely fine. Their latest target is India's moon landing. Last month, Chandrayaan-3 of India landed on the lunar south pole. We saw it, you saw it, chances are the whole world saw it. But China says, not so fast. A top Chinese scientist is disputing India's claim. His name is Ouyang Ziyuan. He's considered to be the father of China's lunar program. So he's one of the best that they have. And what is he saying? That India did not land on the South Pole. In fact, let me quote his statement. The landing site of Chandrayaan-3 is not at the lunar South Pole, not in the lunar South Pole region, nor is it near the lunar South Pole region. Then where is it? And while India gets ready to scale new heights in space, Elon Musk's satellites are falling from the sky. SpaceX launched 21 mini Starlink satellites in February. They were supposed to be next-gen satellites. But they're just not being able to stay in orbit. They're falling off and getting burned to a crisp by the Earth's atmosphere. Meanwhile, China is working on a mega constellation of satellites. It plans to challenge Elon Musk's SpaceX by launching thousands of low-orbit satellites. But why are SpaceX satellites falling off? And why does China want to challenge them? Planet Earth has enough problems to fix, but our world leaders have other priorities. Their newest obsession is mining on the moon. Last week, Russia launched a new lunar mission, their first one in 47 years. What is the goal of the mission? Moscow wants to uncover the moon's secrets. It is believed that many natural elements exist on the moon and they could be mined. But Russia is not the only country that's interested, of course. The US, China, and India too are in this race. Does America know about aliens? Does it have proof about alien UFOs? And is it hiding that proof? I ask because a sensational claim is making waves. Listen to this.
UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine.
UFOs are real, he says, and no, this is not from a Hollywood film. This happened in the US Congress. This claim was made by a group of lawmakers. They were told that America knows about aliens, although, as you heard, he used a different term, non-human beings, also unidentified aerial phenomena. Trust Americans to be dramatic. They're talking about aliens and UFOs. And who are these speakers? Former members of the US defense establishment. They worked for the Pentagon. Some flew military planes. Others analyzed intelligence. This week, they appeared before American lawmakers from both parties. They're conducting hearings, apparently to find out the truth about aliens. 2023 meant serious business. Thankfully, we had Gen Z to lighten things up. These fascinating beings were born between the late 1990s and early 2010s. Last year, Gen Z entered the mainstream. They defined some of the biggest trends, all while confusing us. Basic handsets made a comeback. Dumb phones became the smarter choice for Gen Z. Some youngsters won the economy by living the DINK life. DINK refers to couples with double income and no kids, D-I-N-K. Throngs of Gen Z entered the workforce. They fueled the debate over the 70-hour work week, decided to do the bare minimum at work, and killed off the OG work buzzwords. Meanwhile, some tortured their own taste buds by trying what they called white people food. That's what young Chinese called Western meals, which they deemed, and I'm quoting, the food of suffering. Here's a look at the biggest trends that define 2023. Dumb phones may be making people smarter. Study after study has shown that smartphones adversely affect our intelligence levels. They also reduce our attention span. The so-called doom scroll is often blamed for this. You know what's doom scroll? It refers to the infinite feed that doesn't end, no matter how much you scroll through it. Social media posts just keep coming. The liking, the sharing, the commenting then takes over. And this has reached such a point that it seems like smartphones have become the superior species that control humans and not the other way around. So it's not shocking that people are returning to dumb phones. They say brick phones are making people more productive, more proactive. Some are even calling it the dopamine diet. DINK is an acronym. It stands for Households with a Double Income and No Kids, D-I-N-K, double income, no kids. Basically, a working couple without children. DINKs are all the rage these days. Out of different types of families, child-free couples have the most average savings and the highest median net worth. To put it simply, if Beyoncé sang about the cost of living crisis, she would probably say something like, "Who run the economy? dinks. But remember, not all dinks are created equal. There are also dinkwads, meaning double income, no kids with a dog. DINKWAD. Then there are dinkwas, double income, no kids with a house. DINKWAH. So the budgeting differs. But no matter the category, this trend is picking up the world over. The world over, people continue to put in the hours. They aren't forced to. They want to. Many of them remain alive, kicking and successful. Because for those who want to put in the hours, science has a cheat code. The only way to sustain working incredibly high number of hours is by having fun. Sounds ironic, I know, but psychologically, time is not the same for everyone. Yes, same hours, same days each week, but we experience time differently. And when we're having fun, it passes by really fast, like when hanging out with friends or working on a very interesting project. Time flies. So the key to working a lot is having fun with it, enjoying what you do. Instead of all work and no play, try a cocktail of both. It can be a powerful juice. The latest trend/talking point on social media, it's called the lazy girl, and it's the opposite of what we saw a decade back. The 2010s were the decade of the girl boss. The overambitious woman, her goal was to lean in, to do more at work and then some. But now we're in the era of anti-work, the great resignation. Studies say 6 in 10 workers apparently don't give everything they've got anymore. And the result is this: the girl boss has bid us goodbye. Work life has a new reigning queen. And the so-called lazy girls are taking over social media. They're chasing what's called a lazy girl job. Slay, serve, survive. Lukewarm regards. Hasta la pasta. No, I'm not glitching. I'm simply sharing email sign-offs written by the young workers of today. For most of the world, Gen Z speak may as well be parcel tongue. You know, the language of serpents from Harry Potter, parcel tongue. Gen Z seem to have a language of their own, which not only transforms one day and one reel at a time, but it is killing off the good old OG work buzzwords. A new Barclays survey is out. It says 71% workers believe the young are changing the language of the workplace. 41% say yours truly is dying. 36% say yours sincerely has been given a death sentence. Now, when a bank says that formal corporate lingo is dying, you know that something is up. To live is to suffer. This is a famous quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. Many would agree. Now, this suffering can take various forms. But for the Chinese, it often takes the avatar of what they call white people food. Seriously, that's what they have named Western packed lunches, white people food. Plain ingredients like raw vegetables, sliced meats, and crackers. The Chinese are trying this food, then letting their innermost emotions run free by roasting the meals, not in the way you'd imagine. They say, this is the lunch of suffering, or this meal shows what it's like to be dead, and this trend is going viral. And with that, it's a wrap. The first year of Vantage was fantastic, thanks to all of you. And while you watched the show, we were watching you. I'm serious. All your comments, complaints, compliments, random rants completely unrelated with the stories we were presenting, we watched everything, all of it. We think of this as the Vantage community. We know many of you join us every day. When you don't, we wonder why. We may not respond to every message, but we read all of them. Some of them are funny, some infuriating, but all of them very, very encouraging, because we see them as proof of how invested you are in Vantage. We've strung together some of those messages. If yours did not make it, blame the show producers, because I'm sure I asked for all of them. Thanks for watching.